Hey everybody, Pastor JJ here. Today I want to answer the question, does the Bible have contradictions? And the short answer, just give you a little sneak peek, the short answer is yes, but not really. Allow me to explain. I was in a conversation with somebody recently on TikTok, and there was a little bit of a back and forth about Genesis chapter 2 verse 17. So I wanted to read that verse and we'll take a look at it. Genesis 2 verse 17 says, this is God talking to Adam, and he says, you can live in the Garden of Eden, but you can't eat this fruit from the one tree. And it says, chapter 16, and the Lord God commanded the man, you may freely eat of every tree in the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. And it's kind of a gotcha moment where he says, okay, Adam and Eve ate the fruit from the tree and they didn't die on that exact day, so God must be a liar, because he was wrong. The serpent was right. They didn't die that day. And I responded kind of flippantly, and I felt bad about that afterwards, because it isn't great scholarship, but I didn't explain myself. I just was flippant, and so I wanted to give a more complete video here, because that actually is not the only time that the Bible has a contradiction. Actually, all throughout the Bible, there are little moments that you can grab and you pull out and you look at it and you say, oh, that's a contradiction. Now, I want to explain my response using a little illustration. You see, I'm from the Midwest, right? I live in Michigan, and in the Midwest, people have a particular way of talking. And the way that we talk, one of the ways, it's kind of a distinctive feature of the way we talk, is that we answer questions with yes and no, but you're supposed to ignore the first one. So here's what I mean. If somebody says, hey, did you snow blow the driveway? You might hear the response, yeah, no. Yeah, no, I didn't snow blow the driveway. Now, if you took that response and you, on paper, and you say you could go to a court of law and say the first word out of his mouth was yes, so that means that he did snow blow the driveway, and then you go outside and you see that it's not done. And actually, in the Midwest, you can flip it. You can say, no, yeah. That's something we say. Did you mow the lawn? And you'd say, no, yeah. That's how we talk. We say both, but you're supposed to ignore the first one. It's kind of a little quirk about living in the Midwest. Actually, I think it's pretty common. I think they do that everywhere, but that's where I'm from, and that's how we talk. And so what I'm trying to say here is that the context determines how you interpret that moment, right? Because I'm from the Midwest, you can't just take the words and say this is two-dimensional. You have to understand where it comes from, and so context determines the interpretation, and then the interpretation determines the actual truth, right? So you apply that to the Bible. The context of that story determines how we interpret it, and then the interpretation determines whether the Bible actually contradicts itself. And what I'm trying to tell you is it does not contradict itself if you interpret it correctly. Now, the way to know if you're interpreting it correctly is you go and ask people who are Christian. Are there Christians who understand it this way? Because here's the thing, the Bible, this is not the only time that happens in the Bible. So for example, in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, they actually contradict each other. Genesis 1 has the 7 days of creation, and it's animals first and then humans get made. Genesis 2 is another creation account, right? It's a second story. And in Genesis 2, God makes Adam, then he makes all the animals, then he makes Eve, right? And so it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And the first 2 pages of the Bible contradicts itself. So either God is a liar and the author is an idiot to put a contradiction on the first 2 pages, or maybe we are approaching the text wrong. Maybe we are interpreting it wrong. Maybe there is something in the context that can help us to understand. And it's true, actually, when you look at the original Hebrew of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, one of them is a beautiful poem, an origin story about creation, and the other is a story about our need for community. Neither one of those stories has itemized historical account as their main priority. And I know maybe that's a little complicated, but there's a story where Peter betrays Jesus, and Peter, he denies Jesus 3 times. And Jesus tells him, he says, Peter, you will deny me 3 times before the cock crows twice, before the rooster crows 2 times. Now, I think it's in 3 of the Gospels, it says before the rooster crows 1 time. And then in one of the Gospels, it says before the rooster crows twice. And people grab that and they're like, aha, so the Bible is wrong, it contradicts itself. And it's like, well, how do people interpret the passage? Zoom out, ask the people, how do they interpret the passage? And the reality is, have you ever had a rooster? Have you ever listened to it crow? They don't crow once or twice, they crow hundreds of times. I've been around roosters, they're super annoying. They don't just crow once or twice. And that wasn't the point of the story. The point was that Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and then later in the story he gets forgiven, and it's really a beautiful thing. It's not about how many times the rooster crowed. And so it's just context determines interpretation, and interpretation is what determines whether the Bible actually has contradictions. And that's what I wanted to say. And actually, as a kind of a final note, I want to expand it a little bit. This isn't just about the Bible. This is about almost every single time we are dealing with people who think differently than us. It's a good thing to ask, how do you interpret that? How do you understand it? So if you're talking to someone from another religion, or maybe someone from a different political party, or someone who disagrees with you on anything, try to understand where they are coming from. It's not a good practice to set it up and say, well, I interpret it this way, and that makes you look dumb, so I think you're dumb. That's not very charitable. It's better to say, well, how do you understand it? Ask the question of someone and say, what's your best argument? And then argue with the best argument. And so that's my little bit on whether the Bible contradicts itself. Yes, technically, on the 2-dimensional paper, yes, you will find things that disagree, but not really when we understand how biblical interpretation works. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.